everyone. This is another Freedom to Feel conversation, and my guest today is Ryan Penley. He's the author of Men Up, Sober Up: 8 Powerful Steps to Reclaim Respect, Conquer Isolation, and Thrive in Recovery. So, this is my brief introduction to you, Ryan. One of the questions that I love asking my guests is um, how would you introduce yourself? How would you describe yourself in this moment? Who is Ryan?
I think the most marking description of myself I use. I hope it lands well, but I'm a rock bottom. I'm a rock bottom alumni, meaning
Right.
I feel that I've kind of graduated from the school of being at the stone bottom of despair, and so in conjunction with that, I also think that I like to consider myself an author because. I just published my book, and I think that it's my effort. This book is my effort to reach back and offer any kind of wisdom, any kind of help, any kind of support that I can as a result of my circumstances, and especially people that are in similar circumstances. So, that's it.
Yes, yeah. Somebody who is inspiring and helping others to see what you have seen. So I guess the second question that I have for you is about suffering. How do you make sense of suffering? Why do we go through all these tough times in order to learn lessons?
I think the strongest lesson that I can attach to that question is that we can't recognize the light without the dark. So it's in the contrast. It's in the contrast of our lives that we can appreciate the good times. And so without the suffering, without the problems, without the hardship, we may not really know, appreciate, or recognize the magnificent blessings that are all over the place. So, so suffering is I think a fact, is that it's inevitable. We're going to lose loved ones. We're going to endure. It's a part of it. But I think it can also be seen as a beautiful thing, much like I had said before, because without it, we can't recognize all of the great things. So I think suffering is, like I said, it's inevitable, but it's also can be a beautiful process. Now, it's a lot easier to say that on the other side, right? It's a lot easier to say that when you're not in the trenches. And I'm well aware of that. And then oftentimes, and even myself, when I was in the grips of suffering, it's hard to console a person who's feeling it deep down. They're going through it all day, every day, and it can be seemingly endless. However, most people that have endured can attest to a light at the end of the tunnel. This maybe not the end, but something that is a bit of a reward, if you will, for the suffering, if you can endure. And I think all of us have that strength. I really do.
That's true. Yeah, I do believe that too. Although some people don't survive, right, the suffering. I do know some people who have not survived it. But you said something interesting about the contrast. So having appreciation for life, being able to recognize the beauty of this experience called life. So I'm wondering, once we do that, recognize how beautiful life can be, and we are living from that place per se, do you believe, or would you say from experience, that suffering lessons, that you suffer less these days, or it's still there?
Personally, I feel that I suffer less these days, and
Yeah.
it's something that you had touched on in the subtitle of my book. Is that I use the words conquer isolation, but what I could say, I can reword that. I can reword that and say that I have reconnected with loved ones. I found new loved ones. I have a child on the way in April. So, I would say that
Huh.
I'm suffering less Now, I don't believe that I will also endure more. I understand. I feel more equipped these days. I feel more
Ah,
equipped, and
mm,
you know, I think that is the suffering over for myself? Without a doubt, that is not true. I will suffer in one way or another. However, I feel a little bit stronger for my journey, a little bit more resilient, but
mm,
not calloused. I don't believe that. I feel almost like I'm a little more sensitive at the end, or not, or through that chapter. I've grown more aware of my sensitivity, I suppose. But suffering is going to come for me again, and I hope that this time I will deal with it a little bit better than substances. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Oh, I love that message. Yeah, of resilience. Right. It does makes us stronger. That's so true. It has been my case too. Going through all these ups and downs and feeling the way I felt, and then just finding that light, as you call it, to seeing the beauty in life. And then, in my case, was spirituality. Though I really, that was my path. Was not therapy. I had a lot of childhood traumas. So I know you mentioned in your book. I love the section about something greater. That's when you talk about on spirituality. So how do you see this concept of being spiritual? What is to be spiritual to you, Ryan?
When you're asking that question, my mind goes, and I'm sure you're familiar with him. It goes to a great philosopher and influencer, a little bit ahead of his time, is Alan Watts.
Yeah,
And Alan Watts,
yeah.
he talks about us being connected with all beings in the universe, and it doesn't matter where you are.
Mm,
We're all of us. We all know that we're we.
mm,
The only adage he puts to that is that we can only experience it one at a time.
right. Yeah.
So we can connect, but we still have our two eyes, we still have our two ears, and so
Uh,
here we are. We're connected through the universe, but also, so again, you mentioned the book. It's I mentioned a higher power because
yes.
connecting to however you want to reference it. And I use Jesus Christ. I'm a Christian, but you can use God. You can use Allah. You can use all of these different terms. The universe,
Uh,
the all-knowing, the infinite intelligence, the super intellect, whatever you choose to describe a higher power. I believe wholeheartedly it's not just a spiritual movement emotionally, but it's also advantageous. It's
mm,
advantageous. You can gain an advantage by acknowledging it, and then I hesitate to use the word. I don't want to say like use,
yeah.
but like if it's ideal if you can bond with something higher than yourself, then you're onto something, and you can see real life benefits. And so even a person who may not consider themselves spiritual, I would I would I would tell them like, hey, how about you give it a shot? Because I can promise you, your life will get better. You know.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. What would be an example of that, Ryan, from your own life of connecting to this something greater, the higher power? And what happened? I would love for the audience to have a more concrete idea of that, a picture.
I tell people often, I explain this one before I give like an instance or an example.
Yeah.
A benefit of my process or journey in gaining traction in recovery is that I didn't necessarily get upset or mad at God or the universe
Yeah.
for my circumstances. And that's a blessing because I took a bit of responsibility there. I never cast anger
Yeah.
towards a higher being for my situation. But I dove into scripture in my recovery journey. But I do remember I was in a men's program doing hard labor. When I say hard labor, I was doing like a lot of construction, digging holes
Right.
out in the sun. It was difficult. It's hard, physical. Tough work.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I would be just dying out there. I would be dying out there, and I would be feeling like there was nobody that supported me. There was nothing around to help. And I remember I would pray, and I was not good at praying. I was not good
Yeah.
at that juncture. I didn't speak to any higher being. I was so desperate. I'm like, I'll try this, and I was like, listen, somebody help me. God help me. Like I feel like I'm going to pass out. This is a horrible situation. And I would feel this light breeze. I would feel this
Mm,
light breeze, and it was so subtle. It was so subtle, and it was just enough to cool me off.
mm,
And it was like I would hear that. It's almost like I could feel like, hey, I'm gonna cool you off about 2 degrees,
right.
and that's enough for you to get by. And I would. So I'm thankful for that, right? Like looking back
Mm,
now, like I remember when it would hit my skin, and we're talking just like the slightest bit of cool air, and I would be like,
yeah.
oh gosh, okay, like
Yeah.
because I'm in Florida, it's hot, so I would
Yeah.
just like a little bit of cool air, and I'd be like, okay, and I
Yes.
keep working. So yeah, that was there's a few moments like that really like stuck out to me. Yeah.
Yes, I love that. Wow, I had a lot more profound experiences, mystical ones, when it comes to the presence of the spiritual realm. But that sometimes I mention here, one of which was when I was very young. I remember looking at myself in the mirror and saying, I think I was 7 years old. Oh, you're back here again. And you're in a female body, in a girl's body. So that was something that never left me. Like, why would I say something like that or have that very powerful perception that I was here for the
Mm.
second, third, who knows how many times, and in a different body? So maybe that's why one of my explorations was Buddhism, reincarnation, and all that, because that was my first, let's say, experience without having one, without having any education, any language, just knowing that I was here not for the first time. I was certain about that. I interview a lot of Christians, but they don't really talk about reincarnation. It's more of a heaven, right, Ryan? A place that we go after we die and we stay there if we have done good things here. Are you open to the idea that we never die, that we keep coming back here for new experiences? Or this is something that's new to you?
It's not new, right? But I want to have like an asterisk here. I don't really feel like any of us know a
Mm.
damn thing. And we're all like these delightfully ignorant children. And
Yes.
that's what is
Yeah.
so it's like I've never been one to say you're wrong, I'm right. Because
Mm.
I have my belief. And in addition to that,
Yeah.
I'd like to say that I'm fascinated. I'm always fascinated by other beliefs, especially any belief that's been around for hundreds, thousands of years. It's like, why is it still around? There's got to be
Right.
something there, right? There's got to
Right.
be something there. So I never discredit people who walk a different path, and I always want to like, if I can, and most times I can, learn something. So like I don't I am a Christian, and I'm also a new Christian. This is like I'm kind of a new. Maybe that's why I'm a little more malleable. I'm a little more
Right.
flexible. I don't
Yeah.
I don't cast stones. I'm not about that because I've had stones cast at me, and
Yeah.
that's not fun for anyone. So I don't look down upon anybody else's stance. That's for certain.
Yes, I love that. Being open and the non-judgmental, right, place of living. It's there's something about that. I love being that way. So let's go back to the book and the main themes: addiction. So that's I have to ask you an open question about that. And before that, I want to also mention the I think it's a logo. The name of your company is Rock Bottom Recovery. Fall down
Yeah.
7 times, get up 8. I had a smile on my face, and it just kind of paused me for a while on that phrase: fall down 7 times, get up 8. almost
Yeah.
like being ahead of the game. Before you fall, you become resilient, as you said. You're well equipped. So
Yeah.
that's really great. I have to say, I love that. And that
Mm.
you paused me with that one. What was the inspiration? Did you read that somewhere, or it just came to you?
Yeah, no, it's scripture.
Mm,
Yeah, I can't take credit for that one. It was around a lot longer than I have. But I'll tell you, the first time that I heard it, though, the first time I heard it, I wasn't reading the Bible at the time. I heard it from Denzel Washington.
mm.
And then if you're going to get any kind of message, it's advantageous to have it come from Denzel Washington because I mean, hey, the
Yes.
guy. So, but he said it, and I was like, man, that's really good, and I would kind of say it to myself, and then obviously, eventually, I looked it up. I found out what it actually does come from the Bible, but nonetheless, it's. I think that the underlying lesson I take from that particular phrase is that like it doesn't matter how many times you fell
Mm,
if you just get back up, and you only got to get back up one last time and then you've done it,
yeah.
so it's like and I thought that was always peculiar about the number seven. I don't know
Yeah.
why it's the number seven, but like
Right.
it's in my head. I see it's just mini. If you fall down a bunch, but you get up one last time, all that matters is you got up. That's all that matters. Is that you've actually risen.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's.
Yeah. That's a powerful message, though. It's so inspiring, that phrase alone. And I didn't know it came from the Bible. I didn't know that. So that's good to know. And so going back to addiction, how do you define addiction, and what causes addiction for most people? Yeah, I know you in the book you referred to trauma. That's something that's common. People have been traumatized. But I would love to hear from you here in a live interview instead of, I have some passages here, but I would love to hear your input on that.
So I've developed a kind of interesting stance or approach to addiction. And I'm in school right now to become an addictions counselor. And most
Yeah.
of the classic approaches, the classic tools that counselors use and therapists use, most of the time, they're in the history, the trauma, and more often than not, it's childhood trauma.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt that there's truth in that. However, I think that I approach it at a more of a solution focused stance, if you want to go by like counseling terms. But I've been figuring out that addicts are addicts. It's a character trait.
Yeah.
And not like in the developed character type. It's like for instance, like Steve Jobs. In my mind, he was addicted to innovation.
Yeah.
And then you have Mother Teresa. Was she addicted to
Mm.
peace? Like so. It's like now it's sad that a lot of addicts, a lot of
Yeah.
people, most of the time they get hooked into a substance, and it's a vicious cycle. However, even now, I think that I've taken my addictive character traits, my addictive
Yeah.
personality, and
Yeah.
I've just funneled it into positivity, love, uh, adding value, things of these nature.
Yeah.
So it's like you can take a person that it's like, are you going to find more success keeping them from being an addict if that's kind of how they are, or giving them something useful and
Um,
value adding to
mm.
become addicted to? So it's an interesting thing. The way I look at it, it's like I consider myself, I'm an addict. And I don't think that's going to stop anytime soon. So I'm choosing to be addicted to better things, if that makes sense.
Wow. It makes a lot of sense to me. Yes, a billion times to that truth. So in a way, it is redirecting the energy, right, Ryan? So we're just redirecting, because it's a very powerful energy of longing, of chasing something. So I have here so many things that I have written. There's one I want to mention before, that you have. I think it's a program. Yeah, it is a program called Reclaim Your Life. Take it. It's a free 21-day sobriety and fitness challenge. So before we
Yeah.
talk a little bit more about the book and all the topics I have, talk to me about that. Is that something that you're currently offering, Ryan?
Yeah, it's free. If you go to myrockbottomrecovery.com and check it out, it costs nothing.
Yeah.
And then, well, it costs you nothing but your email. And then I might say hi later on down the road. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think it's a good jumpstart program. It's a good place to kind of make a movement forward. And so I use the word challenge, right, to kind of incite some action. But uh, when I was developing it, I was trying to think of myself early stages in recovery. And I was thinking, okay, you know, it has to be an incremental start, right? So it's not like, it's like if you have a child and you challenge a small child to like, kind of grab your finger or something.
Yeah.
You've got to kind of increase positivity with success. So it's almost a guide and a 3-week guide at that. So 21 days of wins. And so I just linked those days and it's delivered by email. So you get an email every day of some moves to make. And the increment of the time investment is very small at the start, 30, 40 minutes. And then it builds, and it builds and it builds. And so, my ideal vision for that is that everyone succeeds in the challenge. My ideal vision is that everybody makes it. I think that with those, design small wins and moves towards a life of sobriety and a healthier lifestyle, and mostly through physical exercise
Yeah.
and tools of like self-observation. I don't get too deep into it because, like I said, I wanted it to be almost like an intro into a successful life free of substances, and then also a little bit healthier too.
Yeah. I love how generous you are giving this for free, so you're not charging for that. And I was about to ask you before, so you are becoming a coach. You'll be seeing people one on one as well. I didn't see that on your websites, but this is coming up.
Yes, yeah, I'm working. It's kind of in the developmental stage, if you will.
Yeah.
Working on what's the best way to get it done, and you might ask, well, what is it? What is it that I'm trying to get done? And it's to create my vocation to form and craft a vocation that is just making the biggest dent in addiction recovery that I can. And then so I haven't decided on what all the elements are going to look like. But I have a brief history as a personal trainer, so I know a few things about exercise, know a few things about diet. Do I do all of them? No. I make a good effort though. I make a good effort. And so, it's at the end of the day, that's my goal, my purpose is to reach back and help people, start to piece together their lives, no matter where they're at. If maybe they were at the rock, maybe they currently are at the rock bottom like I was, or many people are, or maybe they just want to get a little bit better. I'm going to, in the near future, I'm going to start offering programs, some kind of either group sessions, whatever it might be. But I want to be as constructive as possible. So I'm taking my time and I'm being a little more careful with how that looks, right?
Yes, wonderful.
Yeah.
So the step of, it's not really a step. I mean, I'm sure it is, but it's almost like a must in a way. Regain respect. And that made me think about self-love. That's one of the ways I see it: self-acceptance, self-reliance, self-trust. Do you connect this idea of self-respect to self-love as well, Ryan? And what would that look like? What's your idea of self-love?
Well, you know what I think about love is love fascinates me because one, it's a choice. We can choose it every day. However, we can't quantify it.
Yes.
You can't buy a liter of love. You can't. There's no. You can't. Yeah. You can't. Oh, I'd like 3 ounces of love, please. And that doesn't work like that. But we can increase it ourselves. We can increase it every day we open the door. By larger margins in different relationships. But so love is a choice. We can choose despair. We can choose depression, or we can choose love. And it can be harder for others in circumstances than others. I understand that. So maybe it's not always an easy choice.
Yeah.
However, we can increase it and we can choose it, and so that goes for ourselves and others. So I think that self love is I have found that the easiest way to increase self love is to love others, and I
Mm.
think that when you do that process, even though there's the chance you might get burned once in a while, you
Yeah.
might get burned, but more times than not, you choose to love others, and it will come back on you.
Mm.
So if you don't know where to begin, that's an excellent place.
Ah.
That's an excellent place. Choose to love, and it doesn't have to be all hugs. It could be opening the door for someone. There's all kinds of ways to show kindness, and love, and joy, and we don't always choose that. And so it's if you can develop that the love muscle of just increasing it in the world and going out and making a choice to be about it,
Mm.
to be about love.
Mm.
Before you know it, you love yourself, and it becomes like a positive feedback loop, And so I think that that's the ideal way to approach it. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That's an interesting perspective that I have heard before about loving others. We, in the podcast, I have met so many people. We talk a lot about love, self love, in all these things. But it always starts with us. It's never really starting with other people. But I have heard that before. I remember a mother said that to me. The loving her children unconditionally helped her love herself unconditionally. So that was refreshing. And I guess the question is, why is it so hard, so difficult to love ourselves, to start there? It feels like
Hmm.
common sense, natural, right, to do that. But why it doesn't happen too often, right?
Well, who knows yourself better than you, right? You know
Uh,
all your
yeah,
deepest, you know all the dark thoughts, you know all the deepest secrets, you know all the dirt, and so you build up enough of that, and then before you know it, it's become more difficult than
yeah,
than it should be to love yourself, and maybe there is some truth, but I think most times it's not all true. We've just tricked ourselves into thinking that it's all true about ourselves. And so we
right.
get caught in a negative feedback loop of, whatever that might be, focusing on those dark secrets instead of letting them go, or figuring out a way to cope with them in a healthy sense. So
Right.
you know, nobody, again, at the end of the day, people know themselves more than anybody else does, so they make it hard on themselves to love themselves. But I think a nice little approach for this one is like, or a nice idea to think about is like, we all got it.
Yeah.
None of us are perfect.
Huh.
And I think that if somebody's being hard on themselves, it's like, hey, it's okay. You're not alone. Everybody's got it. Everybody's got
Mm.
that shadow. So it makes it hard, but I would invite people to do that. Realize you're not by yourself. You're not the only one that's had some dark times.
Mm. In your book, there's a section that really caught my attention too. I mean, you say many things, but you said healing and recovery entail diving into the depth of your inner self. True with the capital T. And then you say the level of honesty with oneself directly impacts the success of recovery. And then you had 6 actions to establish truth. That's really great, because more often than not, we just live in denial of the things that we know to be true for ourselves, and we just go on in life that way, and it never works. So, talk to me about each one of those 6 action steps to establish truth. For some reason, this, and especially when you talk about the movie, that watching yourself, doing conversations, the way you behave, but what the things you say, the thoughts that are happening, that are coming into that moment. observation is really important. And you call it even movie time. I think you gave a name to it. So
Yeah.
that's so true.
When I say, I chose the word radical because I wanted to intensify it. I wanted to intensify the truth. And I think that we're too soft at times when it comes to to what's reality,
Yeah.
right? And this is tactical on our minds. This is tactical. It's a self-preservation
Hmm.
movement
Hmm.
in our minds. So when I say radical, I'm trying to like turn up the heat a little bit about the truth, and because too often, like I said, it's we'll dodge the truth because it's a hell of a lot easier over there. It's a hell of a lot
Mm,
easier, and
yeah.
the mind will do that trick. Your mind is
Yeah.
so amazing. It's so amazing at telling itself a narrative that's far from reality because it just makes life easier. It does. It
Hmm.
does.
Hmm.
Believing those subtle lies. Now, everybody has a varying degree of how much they are
Yeah.
dishonest with themselves. So some people are, I mean, I think all of us are a bit blind, everyone,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially myself. But, until, if you want to see some movement, if you want to find some success, the more radical you are about that truth, like I mentioned, and what I mentioned in the book, and you read it, but it's like
Yeah.
the more intense the degree of honesty that you have increases the speed of your recovery. So the
Yeah.
faster and more intense you get with the truth about yourself, the more results you'll see in your recovery and getting your life put back together again if it's fallen apart.
Yeah, that's a big one to be true to yourself. That goes for the simple, a simple practice is when we lie. I love the idea that we can just catch ourselves before we do that, before we answer a question or before we say anything to anyone. Just make sure it's honest and it's coming from that place of honesty. I know that's a powerful practice though, and for me has been one. So the second one was observe your interactions. So this one I love because I love interactions and I love people. I love being around, having deep conversations with others. And yeah, so talk to me about that. Why is that important to pay attention to the way we speak and what we say?
Yeah, it's just like you had just mentioned it. Is I mean, you said it pretty much perfect. Is that you can catch yourself when you watch yourself, and if you can gain a little space. And there's actually, I think the Buddhists actually do this
Oh
quite
yeah,
often. It's like an
yeah.
observation. It's almost I think it's called the Plat. Is that Buddhism or is it the Plat? Is almost like a it's like if you have space behind your own spinal
Right.
cord and you're actually kind of watching yourself. Anyways, I'm no expert on that, but I'm just saying
Yeah,
if you can
yeah,
gain enough space between you and your actions and make some observations, you can begin to like kind of develop this muscle that sees the dishonesty coming, and then you can tell yourself,
yeah.
hey, you don't have to say that. And I've known people very close to me. They sometimes they feel like the truth isn't enough, so they bulk it up with a story
Yeah.
or a lie or
Yeah.
it's like, hey, can you come over for dinner at 6 o'clock? And it's like you could say, well, no, thank you, but instead it's like, oh no, we've got family in town. My aunt is
Oh
here.
yeah.
It's such a
Yeah.
bad time. We're so busy at the house. It's like you could have
Yeah.
just said no, thank you, but everybody kind of like beefs it up, and that's a little one. But like if you were
Yeah.
to just get some space and then watch yourself, you could be like, oh, that wasn't all that honest. And then as you do it enough, then you start to get really good at like, oh wow, like that was not a good that was not the honest truth, you know.
Yeah. I see a lot of within myself and people around me, these kind of behavior and has to do with lies and all that, has to do with fear. It's almost like being afraid to be themselves, to be vulnerable. To the truth is just too seems to it seems to make them vulnerable and weak. You see, it's not weakness; it's actually a power to me. It's that gives us so much more power in the sense of deeper connections. Like when I read your book and the way you talk about yourself and your experiences, that connects the heart. We feel empathy. And I mean, it's just incredible. You just made me cry at some point. So that's what we need to see more with human beings. By being vulnerable, by being true, we actually get what we deeply want in life, which is to connect with one another. But do you agree that fear has its way of blocking our full expression and the love?
Oh yeah, I fear it plays such a major it's such a major hindrance,
Yeah.
and and ironically, it's also a choice, just like love.
Mm,
You
yeah.
can choose to,
Yeah.
because fear is often it's a reaction to something that hasn't happened. You tell the lie, like if you just use the example that I was just talking about, that story about why you can't make it to the dinner that you just got invited to
Yeah.
is so you don't get judged. You're afraid of being judged, so then you develop this lie. And so
Yes.
I agree 100%. You are right. It starts with fear. And then the sad part is, this is the sad part. The sad part is that like it snowballs into a habit.
Oh, yeah.
And then now, like you had mentioned about the speed, now it's like the speed, it's like now the habit is that I tell this white lie, I tell this little lie. And so now the
Right.
speed of that habit is like, it's now worsened. And so now people do it uncontrollably. It's natural to them to just say, oh, boom. And then it's like, oh, that's not that big of a deal. And I was like, well, now you've been conditioned to think that it's not that big of a deal.
Right.
But I wholeheartedly, I agree. You're spot on. It starts with fear. Think about when you have a child.
Yep.
The child does something wrong, and you say, "Hey, what happened over here?"
Yeah.
Ah, it wasn't me. It wasn't you. You're the only one. And then
Yes.
the kid's like looking around, like, oh, I didn't know what to do, so I
Right.
just said it wasn't me. And it's like, okay, well, then they have it's a peculiar moment, right? So
Yeah, yeah, the protective mechanism. In that, some people say some spiritual philosophies they call it the ego. You probably heard about that. I think in the book you mentioned actually that too. The false idea of what we are, who we are. Yeah, it's all about protection. So the more we expose all that we are trying to hide, it seems like the easier life becomes. In a sense of even suffering, it lessens the suffering so much more. So one of the other six action to establish truth is practice self-reflection, which we have been talking about here. Gradually expand self-observation, embrace uncomfortable truth, cultivate humility in facing the truth. So talk to me about that. How do we learn to cultivate humility? What would that look like in real life?
well, one thing I'd like to touch on though is that about
Yeah.
developing it is like starting small, and that's bound with humility, like starting small. And I'm a firm believer that the quickest way to begin this observation is to just write down,
Yeah.
like, and I know why I will say journal, a diary, however you do it, on notes in your phone, whatever. um, Record yourself, and you'll get into the habit, a good habit of saying how you did that day or what happened that day, and it just kind of like touch on some things, and then maybe observe yourself, like, was I honest that day?
Yeah.
Yes or no? And then kind of, it's such a powerful tool. That's a good tool to start that. Now, as far as humility goes,
Yeah.
humility is a lesson that I believe God and the universe and the creator of everything had to teach me, and I think it has a lot to do with why my journey looks like that, and what I outlined in the book. So these moments, I think, were created specifically for me to learn humility, and it was a hard lesson learned
Mm.
because I'm an egotistical. That's me. I always had a big head, overconfident. However you want to describe it, I struggled with humility.
Yeah.
And so I feel that God brought me into these moments that were, I mean, there was no way but to become humble. I was kind of pigeonholed, if you will, by my journey. Now, if you wanted to do this, not by force, not wait for
Yeah.
God to kind of put you in that scenario. Maybe practice gratitude.
Mm,
I think gratitude and the ego are hard to exist at the same time. They won't.
mm,
And especially if you look around yourself and think to yourself, okay, I can see today, I can breathe today, I can walk. And if you start that simple with those humble, taken for granted gifts that we have, and a lot of people take these things for granted, and they are blessings. And if you're not sure about that, look for somebody that doesn't have those blessings.
mm.
And this is a careful method, right? It's a careful method, and you have to be aware, like you had mentioned earlier about awareness is it's not always at its highest for us as humans. We take things for granted. So if you're looking for humility, it's all around you,
True.
but you have to be aware of it. And I strongly urge people to be thankful for what you have, because there may be a day where you don't, and learning humility that way is a bit harder. So I think it's an
Yeah.
important lesson, and if you seek humility, you can find it pretty easily.
Yes, yes. What's not to love about that message? Especially gratitude. That's a big one. That would change everything. If we become grateful for the things we have, instead of always constantly looking for something else, right? To replace or to something more. There's nothing wrong with that, though. It's life is so abundant. That's wonderful to also kind of have dreams and plans and all that. But there is something about, yes, there's something about gratitude. You're right, and being present with the things we have that brings this sense of humility as you speak. It's so, so true, Ryan. Um, another, I know you talk about before you mentioned the small steps, taking small steps. That's true. That's a very good way of starting anything. And you talk about recovery. That's the word. This journey of finding, kind of bringing yourself back to the essence of what you are, or to love, to peace. Is that something that's is there an end to that idea, to that concept of recovery? Is there one day that you might
Mm.
wake up and say, "I'm there. This is the place to be."
Yeah, this is it's so interesting that you mentioned that. I was just talking to a coach of mine, and he was kind of he's a recovered. Say I say recovered, even though that's kind of a no
Yeah,
no. It's not meant to. You're always recovering. You're always an addict, and that's the opinion or the stance of many people. Personally, I'm I'm always just looking for progress, because I think progress is essentially, at the end of the day, is where you want to be in a perpetual state of progress. So,
yeah,
have I used drugs and alcohol? Not in nearly 5 years. So, am I recovered? I would like to think so. However, there's always that risk, and I'm well aware.
yeah,
I'm well aware. So my focus is on progress, and I feel like there was a shift. It wasn't instantaneous. It wasn't like one marker in time. You can't say, "Oh, 3 years, you're recovered. Now you're making progress." Well, it's not necessarily like that so much. It's more of a mindset.
right.
So I start, and don't get me wrong. At the beginning, it's hard earned, day by day, minute by minute recovery. And it is a tough, tough battle.
Yeah,
It's just that now that battle for me is like less of a struggle. It's not as hard for me to walk by a liquor store as it was once upon a time. So now I'm kind of like, okay, I've made some moves in recovery, and now I'm making progress. So it's like kind of like, my sight is on the horizon
yeah,
rather than like in the trenches. Because when you're in recovery, and people that have gone through it know, it's like, man, you're talking like every 10 minutes is like a decade.
Wow.
And, you mentioned small steps. It was so small for me, going back to like humility, it was so small for me. I had to try and not drink for 15 minutes. 15 minutes. I would have liquor and I would say, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to drink for 15 minutes. Not going to do it. And I lost that battle many times, many times. And I think to myself, oh my gosh, I can't even make it 15 minutes. But the 15 minutes turned into an hour, and then turned into 2 hours, 3 hours, and so on. So, and then if you do this enough over time, you've kind of worked your way from recovery. You're no longer in the trenches, and now you're making progress. So, am I always recovering?
Right.
I would say many people would say yes. I personally think that I've transitioned from recovery and I'm kind of moving into progress. But am I ever going to stop getting better? No, I'm always going to try to get better. Always, 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 in one way or another.
Wow.
And hopefully, like spiritually, in my vocation, these are the ideas that I have. So
That's a big picture, a beautiful picture of the concept of humility that you spoke earlier. That shows clearly that you're never really at that point of saying, I am already there. So there's always the hint that humility is always there, always present from what I see. And it seems like it's a big one that I didn't know that was that big in this the process of recovery. And I didn't know, interesting that you call it progress, right? You're always in a stage of progress. So I love that. What a beautiful message that I was not expecting to hear. Yes, humility. It's being divine and human at the same time, in a way. That's, yeah, what a
yeah.
beautiful message.
Well, I think that I think when I hear you speak, and this is what I feel like. I feel wholeheartedly like you embrace femininity, the wholeness, and I can see the dichotomy, right? Like I'm on the other end. I'm just very pragmatic. I'm very. I tend to lean like logical. Like you were mentioning intuition earlier, and whenever I hear the word intuition, I get so jealous because I feel like I'm too much of a. I'm too much of like a bull in a china shop to like be intuitive. Like I'm like, okay, I'm always like, all right, intuition,
Yes.
go. And it's like, that's not how it works.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it feels like a feminine thing. But think about well, you know the story of Jesus, right? And I mean, that shows a lot of softness, the kindness. I mean, he was just the message, just incredible. Love everyone, love your neighbor. I mean, there's nothing more kind and loving than that, and that's not a female thing.
It's true. It's true. It's true. Yeah.
It's a divine thing. I think it looks female. That's good too for those who are incarnated as women. But no, it doesn't. It belongs to everyone. We are all divine. So I want to mention in your book too that caught my attention. There's a section called thought ownership. That's interesting. And then the power in belief, that's another one. You have Confucius as, you mentioned a lot of Stoicism too. You mentioned Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus. And I'm familiar with all these philosophers. I mean, I used to love them years back. And then you talk about commitment, how important it is. I love the section that you mentioned, the 3 reasons why commitment is important. And you talk about motivation, tackling resistance, about securing a long term win, thinking not just for the moment as a gratification, this instant gratification that most people have. And then you talk about, I mean, so many things. And then the Japanese approach, I don't even know how to pronounce it. Kaizen,
Oh
Kaizen.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Kaizen. Yeah, yeah. That's it.
Kaizen, yes, yeah. And you did mention, you talked before about the tiny steps. So you mentioned that before too. So you have been influenced, you have been open to learn from everything and everywhere and everyone. That's wonderful. And that's, so that is very much part of intuition, of that
Ah, yeah.
divine to be open, to be open. So would you like to add anything or elaborate on one of these themes that I just mentioned, Ryan?
Oh yeah, quite simply, I believe that Stoicism was so it's such an imperative part of my journey, and I'll tell you why. It's because you can apply it.
Mm,
That's really what it is. Because I know that you were saying it's not very deep. You wanted to go deeper. However, it's
yeah,
really useful because it's simple.
yes,
And so,
true.
if you're looking for something, if you're looking for a philosophy that won't like blow your mind, and you can say, "All right, I see there's some actionable steps. Like here, I'm reading the philosophy. It's pretty simple, and then you can go out in the world and you can use it. And by that, but you have a point. Like it's not that there's other belief systems that are more profound, I imagine. But like Stoicism to me made sense because I was like, oh, I do I have control over this situation or not? And it's such a simple question, and I use that. That's pretty much the cornerstone of the majority of the
Right.
philosophy. And so I would just use that simple question, and it worked. So, like as far as Stoicism goes, I would say to anybody if it doesn't have to you don't have to think too hard. It's pretty simple. So
Yeah.
so it's easy to use. It's easy to
Right.
use, and so yeah, I would like to. That's I think a good starting point if you want to start getting into philosophy and thinking systems. I think it's a good one.
Yes, it very much is. I remember it was one of my starting points, yeah, years back. Yes, in one of the books that you probably have read, you probably mentioned that too, the Meditations, right, by Marcus Aurelius. That's a great book. And yeah, for those who think about in terms of steps and they are very inclined to logical, actionable kind of experiences, yes, that's definitely it really really helps. So and you have so much more in your book, you have so much more. We won't be discussing here because of the time, but it's really wonderful what are you up to, Ryan? You're really up to something. And that's beautiful. We do need more help, a lot, all the help we can get in this area of unnecessary suffering, as I call it, as I see it. So thank you so much for being one more of the warriors, healing warriors in this world. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
So before we say goodbye for today, I want to mention again. So the book will be linked on the podcast notes. So Men Up, Sober Up. I'll have the link to Amazon and also your website, ryanpenley.org, and also myrockbottomrecovery.com. I have those two. Did I miss anything, Ryan? There's anything, other links that I
No, no, no,
missed?
no. It's just if since I don't have too much of a constructive way to coach or anything like that, there is an author contact form. It's honestly, it goes right
Yeah.
to me. I get it in my email. So if somebody has a question, if somebody has something they want to reach out about, I mean, whatever it might be, I'm going to do my best to help. Whatever my ability is. So there's an author contact form on ryanpenley.org. Just give me a shout.
Wonderful. You can start that coaching earlier. I love that idea that you could do that. So, before we say goodbye for today, again, I want to thank you once again for your beautiful presence in our reality. And I have this question that I usually ask everyone, so I'll ask you too. What three experiences you wish everyone to have before they die, before they lose the body?
Whew. Adventure, or the call to adventure, however that looks for you, embrace it. And then I'd say a second one is to love courageously. Take some risks with love. And I'm not promising you won't get burned, but I think it's worth it. It's worth it. And so finally, just know if you happen to be in an unfavorable position in life, it's possible for you to get on the other end of it.
Mm.
And then looking from the other side, after you've gotten some distance from it, you're going to learn to appreciate the times. And, after it's all said and done. So I appreciate everybody's experience out here. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing timeless wisdom from my view, spiritual wisdom, really, I have to say. Thank you again, Brian, for your presence, and we'll talk
Thank you
soon.
very
Bye
much.
for now.